On the morning of April 14th, the Minecraft speedrunning community woke up to a surprise. The 1.16 RSG world record had just been beaten. Probably. A run had been submitted to speedrun.com that had an RTA of 11 minutes, 10 seconds, a perfect tie with Sizzler's in-game time at the end of his world record. Sizzler's run had been manually retimed to 11:07, but because this new runner had accidentally reset their timer, all we had to go by was their 11:10 RTA. But the closeness of the records is far from the most interesting thing about this new run. There's been a lot of suspicion about the legitimacy of the run, and for good reason. But on top of that, the run itself is really weird. This one is really interesting, so without further ado, let's get into Mynski's new possible Minecraft world record. Whether it'll beat the old record, why it might have been faked, and what makes the run itself so unique. Hey, if you end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing. Most of our viewers aren't subscribed, and it helps us out a ton. Thank you so much, and enjoy the video. So, on the surface, this run is pretty likely to be the new world record. We won't know until the mods verify it, but the run has been retimed to 11:01, beating Sizzler's record, but not quite becoming the first sub-11. So, if the time's good, why wouldn't it be the new record? This is where things get interesting. The runner behind this run is called Mynski, and if you don't recognize the name, it's because this is yet another case of a largely unestablished runner beating the record. Mynski isn't a streamer, and hasn't been publicly active in the speedrunning community. However, this was true for Two Letter Name and FE666 as well, and both of their records were legit. FE666 has even started doing no-mic speedrunning streams. Check him out on Twitch. But the thing that sets Mynski apart from these two runners is their history. When Two Letter Name beat Illumina's record, he already had a verified sub-16 on speedrun.com, which put him within the top 20 fastest runs at the time. FE666 had several old runs verified before his record, with his 1438 ranking him 13th at the time of his record. So, what about Mynski's history? Well, he doesn't have any. The only video on his YouTube channel is his 11:01, and even more worrying than that, his speedrun.com account was created the day before that run. If someone were to cheat a world record speedrun without wanting to put the time or risk in of faking earlier runs to build trust, that's what it would look like. Now, that is by no means hard proof that Mynski cheated, and I probably should have said this already, but hopefully this turns out to be legit, and if it is, huge props to Mynski for an insane run. We'll get into why in a minute, but some parts of this run are really impressive. While we can speculate, all that Mynski's lack of history means in reality is that he's got a bit of an uphill battle for proving the run's legitimacy to the verifiers. Of course, there are also things within the run that can support either side of the argument, but to understand that, we're first going to have to look through the run itself, and independent of the cheating question, it's a really unique run. Let's take a look. Mynski spawns on the coast of an ocean. After getting an axe and some wood, he heads out at 45 seconds. He finds a shipwreck with just enough iron and a really good food chest, so by 2:20, he's ready to enter. It doesn't take long to find a magma ravine, but unfortunately, there's no magma in the right formation. After looking around for a decent bit of time, he finds that it leads to a lava pool, which is in an inconvenient spot, but is still good enough to enter the nether. The combination of the bad ravine and obscure lava pool means that he enters at about 4 minutes, which is a pretty good enter time in general, but for a world record run is really slow. When runners are going for world record pace, the goal at this point is generally a sub-3 enter. So while obviously it's possible to beat the record with a 4-minute enter, it's extremely unlikely. But even less expected than that late enter is the fact that Mynski is a bit of a Minecraft purist, meaning he doesn't use F3. I'm sure you're aware that Illumina doesn't, and he gets by pretty well, but it can't be denied that using F3 is an advantage. Combine the lack of using that advantage with the 4-minute enter, and if I were watching this live, I would think there was no chance of this being a world record run. From his nether spawn, Mynski spots a bastion, but not a fortress. Still, it's a playable seed so far, and Mynski arrives a minute later to the top of a housing bastion. He punches a piglin to trigger the top-down manhunt route, although he's not able to loot one of the chests before leaving. After getting the piglins trading, he makes golden carrots, setting himself up with enough food for the rest of the run. After collecting his trades and looting the double chest at the bottom of housing, he's got all the pearls, obsidian, string, and fire res he needs, and he's able to leave the bastion at 6:45. Again, a really solid time, but not what you would reasonably consider world record pace. After about 30 seconds of traveling, he finds a fortress, which is the turning point in the run. Up until now, the run has been a pretty solid sub-20 pace, but nothing special. After arriving at the blaze spawner at 7:30, his speed skyrockets. He gets really fast blaze spawns, good spawn amounts, and goes 6 for 9 on rods, meaning his blaze fight takes 60 seconds. One of the quote-unquote advantages of not using F3 is that you can just blind travel the second you're ready to go back to the overworld. This doesn't actually help in the long run because, on average, blinding at good coordinates is going to be better than just blinding wherever you want. But in rarer cases of strongholds spawning in less probable locations, it can save time that would have been lost doing the most optimal strat. So, Mynski ends up with a 7:30 fortress enter and an 8:30 blind. But even with that insane split, a 2.5 minute endgame is very rare. Throughout the entire run, Mynski has been cruising at the slowest end of paces that could technically lead to a world record. So, this blind better be good. At first, it doesn't seem like it is. His Eye of Ender points him straight through a forest, but after lobbing 2 Ender Pearls, he reaches an ocean, and upon entering the ocean, he immediately finds the stronghold. The first room that comes into his view is the portal room. So, with a nether to end split of just over a minute, he's managed to keep this run, which had a super low shot of contending for world record, on the pace where it's still possible. But even now, once he's in the end, it's not likely. To have a sub 130 end, he's gonna have to get really lucky with the dragon perch, especially after getting an underground spawn. He's in position for the dragon to perch at 10:30, with 5 beds in his hotbar. Now, regardless of whether this run is real or faked, what happens next is honestly just beautiful. We've seen a no F3 1 cycle in Illumina's world record. We've seen 4 beds in multiple world record runs before. If you ever wanted both of those at once, well, I'll let the end of this run speak for itself. Yeah. I've actually never seen someone do that before in any context, let alone in a world record pace run, where, for all Mynski knew, getting a 5 bed instead of a 4 bed could have meant not beating Sizzler's record. Whether or not this run was faked, which I hope it wasn't, that on its own is super impressive. And even if there was nothing notable outside of the run itself, we just watched a run go from solid sub-20 pace with a 6:45 bastion leave to beating the world record and almost getting the first sub-11 in 1.16 RSG. But as we know, there's more to this run. Now it's time to look at some of the things within the run that you could point to defend either side of the argument for whether or not this run was actually set seed. I'm basically just going to bring up all the points I've heard, and the ones I noticed myself, and talk about them objectively. For now, none of these points are dictating my opinion on Mynski or whether the run is real or not. The first point that someone could make while watching this run is that, while Mynski's mechanics are very good, they're not at the level of other top runners like Feinberg, Sizzler, and Rainex. Of course, they're far better than the majority of people, but watching his run, to some, may not seem like you're watching a runner with world record potential. Next up is the simple fact that he was able to find everything he needed without using F3. The Bastion was within sight of his nether spawn, but he had to get somewhat lucky finding the fortress, as he couldn't know for sure where the quadrants divided. Even vaguer than that would be his sense of how far he was from 0-0 when he blinded. but he ended up with a fantastic blind. Obviously, those are things that can happen from luck, but in 1.16, the runner's going to get more suspicion by default when not using F3. The other thing that could support the notion that he cheated within the run is the fact that while the run was far from played perfectly, there weren't any routing mistakes. He never headed in the wrong direction, and most importantly, he never had to spend significant time looking for something. His not getting the chests at the top of housing could have easily been punishing, but it was okay because the double chest at the bottom had plenty of obsidian. He didn't have to spend any time looking through the stronghold, since the portal room was exposed. And the blind travel directly from the blaze spawner was really good. Essentially, the point this makes is that if you were to fake a set seed run as being random seed, this would be a pretty perfect seed to do so on. And of course, there's the biggest issue of all, and the reason for all the suspicion in the first place, his lack of speedrunning history. But now that all the potential evidence that he cheated is laid out in front of you, let me tell you what I think about this run. There's just no way for us to know whether or not this run was faked until the mods have either verified or rejected it. They have their ways of finding proof, and it'll likely come down to whether Mynski is able to comply with everything they need or not. That being said, I think this run probably wasn't faked. The main reason being that it's really hard to get away with faking a world record run, and a lot more so because, at the moment, Minecraft is the most popular and scrutinized speedrunning game in the world. And there's just so many things that, if you were to fake a world record, would just make common sense to do that Mynski didn't. If I were to fake a world record, the very first thing I would do would be to fake a run that's high enough on the leaderboard to be carefully reviewed by verifiers, but not high enough to bring outside attention to myself. That way, if it turned out I didn't know how to trick the verifiers, I could just slip away quietly and never come back. If I was successful, then I could go for world record, knowing I would probably get away with it and that I was already a quote-unquote established runner. This seems like such an obvious move to me that it's hard to believe someone would try this without taking that step. Another reason I don't think the run is faked is that if you were to fake a world record, why do it so close to the old one? While it turns out Mynski's run is faster on retime, that wasn't necessarily a guarantee, with the RTA being a few seconds slower than Sizzler's final time. Not only could you totally ensure a record time by just rerunning the seed for a slightly better run, but you could greatly amplify the clout you gain from it by getting the first ever sub 11. The only argument that leaves is the fact that it's unlikely he'd have such good routing on a no F3 run. But, you know, it's not as unlikely as this.
Oh my god, one more. Give me one more. Give me one more. Give me one more trade.
For legal reasons, that's a joke. So, to summarize, the new record is by brand new runner Mynski, has very weird splits, doesn't use F3, and has a super cool ending. It's more likely than the average world record to have been faked, but I still think it probably wasn't. I can't tell you for sure though. The only people who can do that are the verifiers. I hope you enjoyed this Minecraft world record analysis. Let me know down in the comments if you think it was faked or not, and I'll be sure to pin a comment under the video once we have a verdict. If you enjoyed this video, we have plenty more speedrun analyses, and you can also check out our Discord and follow us on Twitter. The links are down in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.